So I was talking to Sudaku's chess wizard, and he gave me some ideas about what I could do on Mondays. All right, let's get started. And what we might be doing on Mondays is working on different tools people can use to improve their chess. All right, so as you see in my notes, we're going to start off with talking about the beginning. There he is, the man that I was just talking about. Hello, Sudakus. And we're going to be talking about, along with everything else in the opening, we're going to be talking about goals. But I want to show you a position, and I just want to get to a position for fun. Actually, I don't even want to do that. I want to do things like this and like this. We'll do this. That's always fun. There he is. Now I feel better. He's got his music going. Let's move there. We'll move there. And we'll move here. All right, guys. So let's say this is a game that's being played. And I'm starting here because I want to talk to you about what you should do in an opening when you begin a game of chess. And we're going to dissect it by starting at what it looks like when you're finished with your opening. All right, so white in this story, in the one that we're looking at here on the board, white has completed development. So let me explain to you what I mean by completing development. Simple things. First of all is that I want all of the minor pieces, and minor pieces you should remember from our previous lessons are bishops and knights. They are considered minor pieces. I want all of the minor pieces off of the back rank where their starting point, right? This is where they start. We want them off of that starting point, and we want them out into the board. I want to have castled one side or the other, or moved my king up off the back rank, because I need these rooks to talk to each other. And the way they talk to each other means the queen also has to get off the back rank. Now the king could step up, but the king can also castle to satisfy this. So white is fully developed in my vernacular because all of the pieces are off the back rank that need to be off the back rank, and the rooks can see each other. There's nothing in between the rooks. So this is fully developed. Conversely, if we look at, and where's my flip? This should be able to flip the board, but unfortunately I don't see the tools because I'm in this little miniature view because we're looking at two boards at the same time. So, and in fact, I can even tell that this is kind of funky. Let's move it like that and then see about making it a little bigger. All right. So we're fully developed, but our opponent, the black in this story is not fully developed. And in fact, black has a lot of pieces that have not developed at all. He has not castled, and he hasn't gotten his queen off the back rank. Hey, Ratchet. So this is, in my opinion, poor development or no development, right? They have not developed whatsoever. So white has developed, black has not. Now, because of that, white is going to have great opportunities to launch an attack on black because he's way ahead. And if black continues to do this kind of non-developing activity, white can have a lot of fun and destroy black. So white is feeling quite good about himself in this situation. But again, what do I want you to do? When I say develop, it means get the queen off the back rank. We usually do that last. Get all of our minor pieces off the back rank. We castle to one side or the other so that the rooks are talking. So this would be an example of not developing our pieces, no castling going on. And this would be an example of getting the job done. Now, another concept so the first goal, let me start there. The very first goal in the opening is to develop our pieces as fast as possible. So we not only want to develop, but we want it to be done as quickly as we can. And in fact, I usually joke with people and I say there's 5 goals in the opening. And the very first goal is to develop. The very second goal, the second most important goal, is to develop. The third most important goal is to develop. Now, the fourth most important goal is king safety. So it's not all developed 5 times. And then the fifth one is center control. And so we're going to go over all 3 of those tonight and make sure that you understand the goals. But I want you to understand why these goals are important, not just that they are goals. So when we say king safety, we need to make sure that our king cannot be easily attacked by our opponent. And as you saw in the endgame studies that we've done, lessons 1 through 9, we walked you through endgames. The king becomes a powerful piece in the endgame. So we like our king being near the center if we're getting into the endgame. Hey, busy. So right now, this is not a good place for this king. He's not fully developed. He isn't in a totally safe environment. A lot of bad things can and probably will happen very soon to black in this kind of situation. But white, on the other hand, has 3 unmoved pawns blocking this king. He has a minor piece, a bishop or a knight, and he actually has 2. But he has a knight hanging around. And so this king is super safe. Later in the game, if these rooks leave the back rank, you have to be worried because these 3 pawns can actually become a coffin, right, for this king. Because if I get a rook back here, that would be checkmate. So let me just clear the board over here and show you what I mean. I can have my king behind 3 unmoved pawns looking really safe. But if we're not careful, black can checkmate us. Even if we have like 2 rooks here and we're thinking we're doing well, right? Black wins this game if black is to move. And that's because he can move the rook here and it's checkmate. So while we had a perfectly safe king, we have to remember that once these rooks get off the back rank, that we have to be aware that if these pawns are unmoved and our king is back there, we could get mated. But, so before I move this rook, all I have to do is make what we call Luft. And Luft is German for space, I believe. So this gives the king a place to run to. This gives the king a place to run to. We can even bring the king out so that way if the check happens, he could just step out. You don't have to make Luft. You can actually activate your king, especially if you're getting close to the endgame. But many times, we're going to make Luft. The other thing that is quite useful is I haven't moved my pawns yet. So that, and let's just throw the queen over here. So the check is threatened, but better yet, let's do it this way. Checkmate is threatened, right? If the queen takes the pawn, then the king can't take back because the rook is protecting the queen. So we're threatening checkmate in this situation. But because we've never moved the pawns, we can move that pawn 1 square and say, bada-boom, we are now safe again. So when we say that we have 3 unmoved pawns, we do, and we want to keep them unmoved until we have to move them. We want to move them only when we need to save our king. Okay? All right. So busy, are you saying Luft means air? Oh, that'd be cool. All right, I'll learn something new today. I love learning new things. All right, so our goal again in the opening is develop, develop, develop. And that's our first 3 most important goals. And then king safety, which normally means castling, but they don't have to. There will be situations where you don't castle, guys. It's fine. It's quite okay to have a situation where you don't castle. So I want this to refresh back to being a full board without me having to do the long way of setting it up again. So I can clear the board, but I can't just have it make the board for me. So I'm going to have to do it the long way. There's got to be a quicker way. I'm going to learn that so I can do this faster next time. But at the beginning of the game, if depending on what happens in the game, if I have a blocked position and this position is totally blocked up, and let's say we're even like this, then that king doesn't necessarily have to castle. That king could step up. And there could be situations even where you're like this, where he has more room. The king can step up to let the rooks talk to each other rather than castle. You don't always have to castle to get king safety. It's just by far, most likely, more times than not, you're going to castle to get your king to safety. And safety being away from the opponent, where your opponent cannot easily attack you and chase you. Now, a lot of beginners like to develop the queen very early, right? And so we'll even see openings like this, which is the Scandinavian. And this is where, and you guys should memorize this saying, you're not good enough to make bad moves. So you can look up the Scandinavian. It's got theory. Theory being meaning that it has books and lines written. You could find it in computers. You could find it in books on paper, but you could also find it online. You could find it in puzzles and engines. You could find it on YouTube. You could find IMs like John Bartholomew, who I like a lot. I hope to someday be as good as him. And he loves the Scandinavian. He plays it all the time. But you're not good enough to play this bad move, the Scandinavian, because what's wrong? The queen is out first. Remember I told you that I should develop my minor pieces. And for beginners, I recommend that you move a knight, and then a bishop, and then a knight, and then a bishop. In that order, normally. So in this case, I can do it. I can develop a knight, and let's say he goes over to here. I can develop a bishop. Now my opponent, hopefully, if they knew what they were doing, but a lot of times you bring out the queen, it's because they don't know what they're doing, and they just want to attack with the queen. So let's say they develop the pawn here. I'm going to develop another knight. So now I have 3 pieces developed, and black only has 1, and the 1 is a queen. So not what we were hoping for if we were black. Oh, he finally develops another piece, and we castle. And then let's say black makes more bad moves like pushing a pawn. Still not developing another piece, and instead simply pushing a pawn. So white is pushing a pawn, but it's a center pawn, and those are the pawns we prefer you push as beginners. But he's doing it to release the bishop, so the bishop has life. And so let's say black finally develops something, and now white develops. And so white has been busily trying to develop all of his pieces as fast as possible. And notice he has all 4 minor pieces out. And he did it knight, bishop, knight, bishop. He did throw a castle in between, the act of castling. But now he's ready to, one move away from fully developed, he's ready to attack. And if his opponent doesn't know, right, he says, well, I'll stop, this check or something. Who knows what he's trying to stop. Now it is white's turn to launch an attack at black. And he's got things to do. He can come here because that discovers an attack on the queen. So if he moves here, black doesn't have time to take. His queen is now under attack. And so let's say he says something like, well, I don't want to lose my queen. I'll come here. Bad move, of course, right? Because now you could take here with check and win the rook. Now, of course, you might say, yeah, well, black will go here. No. But you might say, oh, black will go here. Protecting the pawn. Safety. Whew. But can you chase the queen some more, right? Can you still harass the queen? And yes, you can. Because the knight is protecting the bishop. So we're chasing the queen again. So now the only place the queen can go to try to still protect this pawn is here. And you can start getting the idea that white is on the offensive, white is chasing black around, and you can gain what we call tempo, which is moves, right? Time. We can gain tempo while chasing black around. And that's something in general, again, we probably want to do. It's a good thing. So I'm not saying these are the best moves, but it's a game that I like to teach my beginners, and Ratchet's got it right. We call it Chase the Queen. If you could play Chase the King, even better. Even better if we could play Chase the King, because checks, they have to run. Queens, they don't always have to run. The queen might decide he's not going to run, right? I'm not going to run. I'm going to stay right here. I don't want you chasing me around. So that could happen. All right. So the idea, again, in the opening is to develop our pieces as fast as possible. And if you notice, these pawn moves did not help with development. So that's nice, right? Putting the pieces out on the board, maybe you say, I got you. I can do that. But there's a difference about where you put them. So first thing I'm going to tell you is that we normally push a pawn, queen pawn or king pawn. One of these two pawns. We usually attack the center with a pawn. But we're not just attacking the center. We're freeing the bishop. We're freeing the queen. And we are attacking the center. And we're occupying. The center are these four squares. This is the center. Nothing else. That's all we consider as the center, is those four key squares. So we are occupying a center square and we're attacking a center square. And that's all good. That's what we want to do in general. We're going to develop our pieces out towards the center usually. But do we? I know a lot of people, they put their knight here on their first move. I know people that put their knight here on this first move. And I know people that put their knight here. And the question is, does it make a difference? Does one square make a difference over another? So I'm here to argue that yes, definitely. It depends, or it doesn't depend. It does make a definitive difference which square we put our knight. And I know a lot of you guys that have already been in my class, you know the difference. But we have three choices. One is the worst square, one is the best square, and the other one is okay. And since my beginners know, I don't have to ask you, right, Keith? Which one is the worst square, Keith?
The worst square?
Worst square.
The worst square is knight to the side where it has no other spaces. I don't know which square that is. I can't see it on the bottom. H3. Yeah, there you go.
All right, so
that's the worst square.
Why is it the worst square?
Well, it limits the scope of the knight. There's no other. We can't go that other direction, so just took away nearly half of its moves.
All right, so it doesn't have as many moves. It's on the rim.
Yes.
We don't like it on the rim, but we also like to look and say, how many squares does it hit? How many squares does that knight hit from that location? 4. 4 squares. That's all it hits from that location. How many of those squares are center squares?
0.
None of them. Absolutely none of them. So we only hit 4 squares. None of them are center squares. And only 2 of them are what we'll say this is the marginal line. Because we have 4 squares, right, to our side, and our opponent has 4 squares. So how many squares are we attacking past the marginal line? Only 1. So no center squares, only 1 past the marginal line, 4 total. Not the greatest location. So how about if we go to the second best location? How many squares do we hit from here? That's number 2. This is number 1. I mean the worst one. This is the second. This is better than this one. How many squares do we hit?
6.
6. How many are center squares?
1.
1. Very good. 1 center square. How many are past the marginal line? How many are on our opponent's side of the board? None. 0. We are not attacking any squares on the opponent's side. So we went from 4 with no center squares to 6 with 1 center square. So let's look at the best square for the knight. How many squares do we attack? 8. Very good. And we do the best we can. We actually form this circular looking pattern where we attack all of 8 squares. How many of those squares are center squares?
Two.
How many are on past the marginal line?
Two.
2. So this is just by definition, if you look at what it attacks and how active it is and how many squares it hits and how many center squares it hits and how many squares on the opponent's side of the board, this is by far the best square for the night. Best square for the night. Hands down, best square for the night. And the same thing for this knight to be here, and the same thing for black's knights. To go to the bishop file, F and C files, these are the best squares for the knights. Look at all those center squares they're hitting, and right, they make a nice little box. But sometimes we'll find that we put our knight here. And it's sometimes because we've moved our queen bishop pawn to protect the queen pawn. Maybe we have a long pawn chain. So we might develop the knight here. We still don't want to develop it here because of the same problem. It doesn't attack enough squares. And if we ever did, it's probably just so we can move it again to attack here. But this would be definitely the next best square. It does hit a center square. And sometimes you do put your knight on D2 or on E2. Accepted, happens, we understand. But we do need to know generally the best square for the knight. And this is the best square for the knight. And this is the best square for the queen's knight. Now, that said, what do you guys, can you tell me the best square for the bishop?
Any square in the center of the board.
Any square in the center of the board. Interesting. Okay, what do you think, Murph?
Well, it depends on whether we're talking about black or white, but I would agree with what he's saying because it'll control the diagonal on both directions.
All right, so I'm hearing you say in general, you think any of these center squares would be a best square for the bishop.
Best square for the bishop would be.
Yes.
Oh gosh, I can't be thingy.
And you're basing that, I take it, because it might hit the most squares?
Yes.
All right. So that basic tenet, I'll agree with, that you found a good reason to put the bishop in the center. It does attack the most squares, but it might not be the best square for the bishop if those squares are blocked up, right? And even, I won't even make it with the bishop's under attack. We'll leave the bishop not under attack. So now the bishop is only going to here, remember, because that's in its way. Oops. Right? There's a pawn in its way. Or maybe your pawns are in its way. So in this situation, let's say we're like this, the bishop might do better over here. Over here, right? And if we really got messy and we said our pawns look like that, is that a good square for the bishop?
No.
No. But you're right, in general rule, you might say bishops in the center are the best square, but here's another problem with the bishop in the center. Usually there's pawns, our pawns, and our opponent's pawns are going to be in the center. So it's really hard to put this bishop in the center square.
Yes, well, positionally, if you're asking where a bishop's best placed, I'd say on open diagonal.
Very good. I like that a lot better. So bishops belong on open diagonals. But let's look at this sample game here, and we'll play a Roy Lopez for the moment. So we might play the Italian game. We might play the Roy Lopez. We'll be putting the bishop here on b5. We might play c4 with the bishop, which would be the Italian game. We might fianchetto the bishop and go into a King's Indian attack. Right? We might do this so we can do that. So we have to decide where this bishop belongs and where this bishop belongs. Now, because I fianchettoed, I'd say as a beginner you have to put it here. Because if you put it any place else, this just became a weakness, and you don't want a castle on the queen king side anymore. Because remember, we wanted 3 unmoved pawns. So the exception is if you're going to fianchetto, I'd let you say okay. But you have to make this decision. And here's the thing. You have to make the decision early. Am I going to put my bishop here, 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 or am I going to fianchetto it?
Well, we know it's not D3.
Yeah, Murph, you do know that now. That's called Murphing. That's called Murphing this poor pawn, blocking it so this bishop can't get out. We do not want to go to D3. Agreed. Everybody understand why? Everybody see why? We'll be what we call Murphing the pawn. We named it after Murph. But that pawn can't move now. And you'll see grandmasters and masters make this move and later do this move and then drop the bishop here and then push that pawn. But we're not good enough to make this bad move, right? Because then we have to remember to do this, to drop it here, to do this, and understand why it's all playable at the time. So we don't want to do this move. This is a move that we're not good enough, right? You have to be really good to make bad moves, and we're not that good. Another place we know we don't want to go is here because we would just lose it. So we only have these squares or fianchetto. How do you decide which one you want to do? None of them are center squares, so it's not like I could pick a center square, which would be the best square, right, if we could manage it somehow.
It depends on what your opponent does.
No, you're gonna go for the. I'm sorry, Murphy.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna say you're gonna go for the one that attacks the center square.
Okay, that might be a good way to look at it. So yeah.
It's a development move.
So which one attacks the center square? This one?
Yes.
Yeah. And so that is fine. And you're going to find an opening theory for almost any of these moves, except for probably the bishop here. So yeah, this is called the Italian game so far, or the Italian opening. So all these openings also have names. So besides that, we're learning about why and where we want to put pieces. You can actually go and study this and look it up, and it'll tell you how you should continue for the next few moves in this opening theory. And it'll tell you if black does this, then you do that. And if black does this, you do that, right? So you'll have this thing that you can learn. There's one that's called the fried liver attack, which had a lot of popularity when I was young. All the kids were learning it. They were like, oh, this destroys, it's great. And it's like today, it reminds me totally of the Stafford Gambit, where again, a lot of young players are like, oh, this is great, because they saw I Am Rosen playing Eric Rosen. They get some easy wins. They think it's, the greatest thing in the world. So this is the fried liver attack because it's really hard for black to stop white from taking this pawn now. And there is theory. We're not going to go over that theory right now. But the point is that there's an opening that you can learn with traps and tricks. And that's one of the benefits of learning an opening at all, is that you can look it up and you can use engines and books and online materials to learn tricks and traps. And inside of Lichess, you could just turn on the opening database, the opening explorer and table base, and even in Lichess, you could see what people play in these situations. So, all right. So this is what you can deal with, right? You can decide how you want to play. But yeah, this has some merit, right? Because it not only attacks the center square, it also attacks this square right next to the king. So that's a nice thing. But, this is one of the most famous openings of all time, the Roy Lopez or the Spanish game. And there's really nothing wrong with coming here so that if he ever tries to pin, it's not going to matter, and you can develop. And there's actually nothing wrong with fianchettoing and putting the bishop here. So the tricky thing about bishops is that you don't know where they belong. And it depends on how you're going to play out the rest of the game. You have to decide, do I want to play this way? Do I want to play this way? Do I want to play this way? or do I want a fianchetto? And then after I do that, now the only thing I would tell you is understand if you put your bishop here and you block it in with a pawn, that bishop is going to have a long wait to become active. So if you do something like this, that bishop only has this square or fianchetto. But either way, your own pawns are in its way. And so you have to understand that bishop is going to take a long time to become active. And because the center is the fastest way to get from one side of the board to the other is to go through that center. And so Irving's idea of the center square being an important square for the bishop, the best square for the bishop. But those center squares make it possible to get across the board quickly. So these center squares are critical, these center squares, but these are your two center pawns. So that is critical to your mobility, your ability to go from one side of the board to the other quickly. All right? So, what are you going to do? If you block in your bishop with your own pawns, we call this a bad bishop. It's not like he ever did anything wrong, but you've put him in jail anyway. So he must be bad. That's a way to think of it. I've locked him in jail, so he's bad. While the dark squared bishop has total freedom. He can go to these squares and run around, right? So the dark square bishop doesn't have any of his pawns keeping him locked up. Now, let's say you say, well, yeah, I don't like locking up my bishop. I'm going to do what Keith suggested. And now I'm locking up the jail, but Keith already escaped. So it's okay. This bishop is outside of the pawn chain. This bishop is not in jail, but it's still considered the bad bishop. It can't come back quickly. It can't come back quickly. It still cannot use the center squares to get around the board more quickly. It's a little better out here because he's attacking things than being stuck here. So we like to put the bishop on the outside of our pawn chain. And that's what Black did when he did that. And then now I have this bishop that can go to squares, right? And I have the knight to develop, and I need to castle. But remember, I don't need to castle kingside. I can castle differently. And now I can castle queenside or kingside. And that's a good thing. There's nothing wrong with that. He can attack my bishop. I can take back with the pawn. I might decide I'm going to castle this side. And if he takes, I have open lines to come over here and try to hurt him. So, the game will play on. But I don't have to castle kingside. I can castle queenside. So one of the niceties of developing all of my minor pieces and getting my queen off in that order is now I have the choice to castle to either side. Okay? But if I didn't develop my queen last move, I can only castle kingside because the queen's in the way. Thanks, Busy. We're not analyzing. We're talking about how you can open a game. Hey, Benji. So is Roy Lopez opening stronger than keeping the bishop at c4? So the Italian game is a different opening. The Roy Lopez is a different opening. They have different flavors, different styles, different theory behind them. Now, I would not say one is stronger than the other. It depends a lot on your style, on how you like to play, and what you're trying to do. Yeah, in fact, except for bad openings, I'd say any opening can be good. And it depends. So opening, your guys, you're not going to be better just because you play a certain opening than all of your opponents. You're going to be better because you play the opening, middle game, and end game better than your opponents is how you're better than your opponents. All right? It's not going to be, oh, I'm playing this opening, so I'm going to win every game I play. Nah, ain't going to happen, especially as you get against stronger players. Okay? So, what is our goal in the opening? We have 5 goals. The first 3 goals are develop, develop, develop. Our next goal is to get our king to safety in one way, shape, or form. And then the last one is to control the center. Now, we haven't talked about controlling the center, so let's check out controlling the center. All right. So black gets to move. We'll do one more move for black. Now, how do we count control of the center? Well, there's two things. One is just occupying the center usually means something, right? Having pawns in the center. So if you had no pawns in the center, if you remember that ugly line that we looked at earlier, that's not really good, right? If we go, where was it? It should have been a lot more than that. So like this. Black isn't even occupying the center. So white is clearly controlling the center, partly because he has both pawns in a duo formation. Call that duo. They're side by side, and they're taking up the center squares. But we want to do it based on a counting method. So based on the counting method, where is my last? Okay. So based on a counting method, let's say we do this one, and we castle, and then we said, oh, instead of taking, we're gonna let him move the bishop queen up. All right. So now we're both fully developed, guys. We're both fully developed. But who owns the center? So black has 3 pieces attacking that square. White has 1. So black owns this square. Now, can that change? Sure. Pawn pushes, other things happen. You definitely can change who owns a square. But it's important to understand who owns it today. All right? So right now, black owns that square. White owns this square. I said that pretty quickly. I should actually count. So there's 2 pieces attacking that square. There's only 1 of black's attacking back. And understanding that it's important to know how many you have attacking, it could change again. Now that queen moved. The move before, that knight is attacking the square, but understand that he might lose his queen. And if the pin were against a king, let's say the king were here, then that knight actually can't play, right? So this is not an absolute pin. This is just a pretty valuable pin because it's against a queen. But it's not an absolute pin. If it was a king over here or here, then that knight cannot legally move, and so you would not count that knight to be protecting the pawn or that square. We're not even talking about pawns, we're talking about squares. All right, so we have 2 attacking this square. Black only has 1. So this one was a black square. This one is the white square. This one we have 1, 2, 3 attacking. Kind of the converse, right? And black only has 1. So this is white, and this one is black. And guess what this one will be? It'll be black. We have the knight and the pawn, 2 pieces attacking. So these 2 are owned by black, and these 2 are owned by white, which makes total sense if you look and say that white is playing on the white, right? His pawns are on the white squares. The bishop is out here on the light squares. He's dominating, trying to dominate light squares, and black is working off the dark squares. Can that change? Yes, again, that can change in a heartbeat. But this is what you have to understand what's going on, because then you might decide to make changes based on that. So white can do things like push this pawn to try to get 1, 2, 3 pieces now attacking that square by just pushing the pawn, so it allows the queen to attack that square. White can go here and attack the bishop. Why? Because the bishop was hitting the square. Now the bishop has to move, and maybe we can get him away from protecting this square. We could take the knight. That takes away a defender of these 2 squares. But white already owns those squares. So white either wants to continue to really own those squares where black can't even touch them, or white might say, I want to also own the black squares, because if I own all the squares, I'm going to be creating pressure for my opponent because I'm dominating the center. All right? Busy's giving opening lines or names for everything that's possible in here. So cool. Good job. Good job. And I'm glad you can make it, Benji, because this is a class for beginners. And you asked me about beginners. All right, guys. So this is the goal in the opening, and you will find that you'll either win or lose based on a lot of games you'll lose or win based on how well you develop. A lot of beginners never get past the opening. Now, we started with the endgame. I think it's imperative that we started with the endgame. I want you to think about the fact that you want to reach a position where you're developed. And if you can do these two things, get to a position where you're fully developed, you shouldn't lose the game in the opening, because guess what? The opening's over. The opening's over. So the way that you're going to lose the game in the opening, right, is if you do bad things. So if white does bad things like just push pawns and lets black do whatever he wants, then white's going to lose the game in the opening. But white had to help. I mean, white totally had to help. White didn't develop any pieces, none whatsoever. White totally ignored the attack that came, right? What did we do next? We did this, right? Or, yeah, it doesn't matter. But we do this. So black attacked the pawn, and white did nothing about it. White just kept sliding pawns around. And still does nothing about it and allowed you to checkmate. So white is complicit in this losing in the opening. And I will tell you for sure, if you're losing your games in the opening, you're complicit. If you're losing the game in 5, 6 or less moves, you're complicit. Because you're not, one, paying attention to your opponent's moves, and two, you're not developing your pieces. So we've talked about the goals in the opening. Let's talk about another factor that I find is critical for beginners, which is free candy. And the concept of free candy is pretty simple, and it talks about both sides. So we go here and we see this. This is not free candy because it's protected. We take, black takes back. Even though we just said this is not a good square for the queen, it's out too early, but it's not free candy. But if we do things like this and murph this pawn, can you see free candy now? Does black have free candy for the taking?
Yeah, you can take the pawn.
Yeah. He can get this free pawn, and now he's threatening to win the rook. So that's free candy. When you give away material and it's not protected. And Bolt says another way to lose in the opening is to take free candy that isn't really free, it's a trap. And we call that poisoned. Poisoned pawns, or just poison candy. Think the wicked stepmother or the wicked witch, right? And she gives you poisoned apples or poisoned candy. Okay, so we're not, right? We don't want to go into the Hansel and Gretel house and be shoved into the oven. But you just have to pay it. We're back to having to pay attention and not lose free candy. So let's say white even goes here and says, ha, now I got your queen. And black says, yeah, but I'll just take. So after all of that, white has 2 pieces developed. Yes, way ahead in development, but we gave away free candy. And that free candy may not be worth you being ahead in development. It might be if you can get an attack and win candy back. But that's the danger of gambiting or giving away free candy. Because even if you get the tempo to develop faster, you have to be able to get back that free candy and hopefully more. So free candy is when we give things away for free. Here's another example of giving something away for free. It's a known gambit. This is a known line. But it can be bad, right? So if they play something logical like the knight to stop the queen from coming here, no worries. But if they don't know the opening and they just gave me free candy, should I develop, right? Should I just keep developing? I wouldn't. I'd take this in a heartbeat. Because guess what? I'm getting more free candy, guys. We love our free candy. Check. There's only one way to get out of check. You see it? You guys see how to get out of check?
Take the queen with the knight.
Yeah. And so what did we just win?
A rook.
A rook. We just got a rook and 2 pawns for our 1 pawn. So would I keep developing? No. If your opponent gives you free candy, you're allowed to stop the goal of development. Free candy is definitely worth stopping development and grabbing the free candy. Do I want to develop the minor pieces first? Yes. But am I going to break that rule? Yes. Because I have this great opportunity.
If you didn't know what was coming and you're white, do you still do this?
So when you say I don't know what's coming, do you mean I don't see ahead enough that after this, all this being forced, that I win the rook?
Correct.
Then no, you don't. You need to actually stop and look, and you need to say, this was a big bad mistake. My pawn is hitting here. I have a check. So you're bringing up, besides free candy, another topic, which, let's see, it's 8:47. We go till 9:30. So I think we have time. So that would be the other thing, is checks, captures, attacks, threats, and I think it's S, but I think it might be scat. So it's how the situation changes. All right, but we'll talk about it. So it's white to move. First thing he could do is always develop. Right? He could develop his pieces. If he develops his pieces, you can't really fault him. Okay? He took the free candy when it was offered, but he could develop his pieces right now, and he'd be fine. He could be developing his pieces. But you know that you could develop your pieces, and you know the best squares for these 3 guys at the moment. The bishop might go there. Again, the bishop might go there. So we usually like to wait to develop the bishop, because we like to wait to see what the board looks like a little bit to decide the best square for the bishop. But in this scenario, I could develop my pieces. But I also have what we say when we say cats: checks, captures, attacks, threats, and how did the situation change? Well, I have a check. It's the only check I have. And I need to then calculate and say, if I say check, what can he do? There's only one legal move. So anytime that I can force my opponent to do something, I could force him to move a certain piece or pawn, then I want to take some time and look it over. And it's not as hard to calculate because it's all forced. So queen here says check. He can't move his king. He can't put the knight in front. He can't put anything in front except for this pawn. So now I have to just, in my mind, visualize the queen is here and his pawn is here. Now, what can I do? Well, he's attacking my queen. I could take his pawn. If he takes back, what would you do? I'm not even going to put it on the board. What would you do if he pushes this pawn and I take it with my pawn and he takes back with his pawn? What do we do?
Take the rook. Rook. Yep, take the rook.
You're all wrong.
Hey, take the pawn.
What happens if you take the pawn?
Checkmate.
Yeah. So again, Murph, you're saying, how do I figure this out in my head? Well, the queen goes here. This is his only legal move. And then I got to figure out, what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to take with the pawn. And if I take with the pawn, what can he do? The first thing we might look at is pawn takes back. And Murph, you might say, well, then I could take his rook. I get a whole rook. I'm going to do this queen move. But you have to check, what else could he do, right? But so far, you might just say, if I go here, he pushes, I take, he takes, I win the rook. Woohoo! Good enough for me. But if he goes here and I take here, he doesn't have to take back. He can come here with the knight. That's legal because he's not in check. He can move the knight. And the knight would be attacking my queen. Doggone it. All right, but I know I can, if I take here or push the pawn, I get a check. So I might get scared and run away. But I might say, no, that's okay. I could just say I can run away. My pawn's here. I can even back up to here, right? And that way, if I back up to here and he takes back, I still get to win the rook. So he can't take me, right? That could be my thinking. But in either way, you might have to say, okay, so if I take and he puts the knight here, you might see that I can push the pawn and say check. He could take my queen. I could take his rook and say queen, and I'll win the rook. So hopefully you could figure that out in your head. So those are the only two legal moves he has. And so you might say, I'm going for the check. Even if it's bad and I have to back up, I'm going to go for the check because I know he has to do this. And so I take. And I say, okay, let's see what he can do because there's no move he could do that's going to make me lose the game right now. And if he moves the knight, I could even then say, okay, so what do I want to do? Dag, he moved the knight. And even if you don't see this check and he takes and you get to take, even if you don't see that and you run your queen away, like here, and attack the rook, right? Okay. You're still winning. You still have a free pawn. You still have a decimated king side where he's not looking good. It's okay. So you've broken the rules by bringing your queen out early, but it's okay. It's okay. All right. So
It's only okay because you wrecked his side.
Yeah, I wrecked his side and I got a free pawn. And if he doesn't take back, I got another free pawn.
This whole idea of, and I forget how you want to word this, but one of the problems I had early on was following and a lot of beginners do this, they have a blueprint. And our blueprint, for instance, was the 3 develop. And if you go off script, and if it doesn't work out for you, then you have a problem. But sometimes you should go off script, and this is where your gray area is for beginners. Where should we know to do that?
So this isn't only...
Should I know that this is going to happen?
Right.
Or should I say, I would bring the queen up and get a check. He's going to push the pawn because it's the only thing that can be done. And I'm just going to pull the queen back to safety. Was that worth it?
Yeah, so you're saying, like right now, what happens if I just bring the queen back?
Right.
And you might say, yeah, that's good. Because, by the way, if he goes here, what's that called?
Right, checkmate.
It's still checkmate. So, yeah, I mean, you can do that. Of course, you had better. But, yeah. So, you're breaking the rule.
If you don't know you have better, should you be doing it?
No. Let's say you can't. Let's say you're such a beginner that you see the check because you checked for checks like you're supposed to. Again, this mantra goes along with the goals in the opening. So let's back up. Your goals in the opening haven't changed. Develop, king safety, and central control are the goals for you to achieve throughout the opening phase of the game.
Okay.
But while I'm doing those goals, I am always looking for free candy. And I'm always looking to avoid giving away free candy. So let's back up. Let's back up to here. Black made this move and gave away free candy. This is a center pawn. By rule, I don't want to take a wing pawn because I gave up my center pawn. I'm giving up control of this center square. Right? So that's 1. 2, I'm moving a pawn twice in the opening, which slows down development. 3, I'm moving a pawn again. A pawn. I don't want to move pawns. I want to move pieces. So I could blindly develop a piece. And my opponent could take. And I could take back. And I could end up where, yes, I followed the rules for development, but I lost a center pawn for a wing pawn, which is not what we want. I could do worse. I could develop the king's. If I'm really following the mantra, I'm going to develop the king side first so I can castle faster. But then black again gets to take now a free pawn. So where he offered free candy, now I am instead offering him back free candy. So while I am following the mantra or the rules, the goals of develop, 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 king safety, and central control, I have to pay attention to any attack and not let my opponent take free candy from me. And conversely, if my opponent makes a mistake, and remember, it's the opponent that makes mistakes that help us out. If the opponent makes a mistake and offers us free candy, we should take it. That's another general rule. When offered free candy, as long as you know it's not poisoned, you should take it. And if you can't tell if it's... Say it again?
That should oversee your... So, just along with what you're saying right here, move the knight back for a second, please. So, we have different rules. We know there's free candy here, but I also know we don't want to trade a center pawn for a wing pawn, like we said. If we don't take him, he's going to take me. I don't want that. What if I push it?
Yeah, but you can push it, and pushing it is kind of nice because it keeps the knight out of the best square.
Right.
But it's breaking the other concept of free candy.
Well, this is where the conflict becomes for people who are beginners, because we have all of these different rules, and when they conflict with each other, somebody needs to oversee another, be the top rule.
Right.
So I guess the top rule is free candy overrides everything.
So
let me just add to Murphy's point. A lot of times I see people coming out with strange things like that, and I'll automatically assume it's some kind of gambit trick. And sometimes I don't want to take the free candy right away because I think maybe they're setting me up for something that, that's a gambit,
Yeah. No, I mean, even here, right, you can say, hey, whoa, why is he giving away free candy? Is he going to come and kill me? Right? Does he have some diabolical plan? And actually, this is an opening. The Latvian counter gambit, I believe, or the Latvian gambit. So black might know what he's doing, right? You might take it, he might develop the knight and say, I'm going to win this pawn back eventually. You did give up a center pawn for a wing pawn, but my general rule for you is if someone offers you free candy and you don't see a reason not to take it, take it. So even Keith, if you say, yeah, I'm scared he's got a gambit in mind, he's tricky, he's going to get me, then I'd say, show me. I'd say, I'm going to make believe I'm from Missouri today. Show me. So I'm going to take the free candy, and he might trick me and trap me and destroy me. And I'll have that game to go over later, and I'll learn. And I'll go, now I see why that wasn't safe. But if you're scared to ever accept it, you'll not learn that, one. And two, you'll probably lose a chance to win because they probably don't know what they're doing. Remember, you're playing people your level, right? Now, if you're playing a GM and he does this, do you think it matters if you fall for a trap or not? The GM is still going to probably beat you, right? A grandmaster. So I would always accept the free candy. But you said rules, Murph, and so I want to help. None of these are rules yet. Well, I'll think about it and see which ones should be rules, which would put them up at the top of the list. Right now, I think of you have goals in the opening, things you're trying to get accomplished. That's what a goal is, something you're trying to accomplish. What I'm trying to accomplish in the opening is development, king safety, and central control. And the most important thing I'm trying to accomplish is development. And not only development, but to develop as fast as possible. It's actually a race. I want to develop faster than my opponent. I want to develop as fast as I can. So those are things I need to do in the opening. They're not rules. Now, there are considerations. Free candy is one of them. Whenever you have opportunities for free candy, you want to take it. When you realize that your opponent is threatening your material, and if you don't do anything about it, they will win free candy, you want to do something about it. And then we have every move, you want to just take a moment but a lot of times, depending on what speed you're playing, you might not be able to, but you want to take a moment and say, do I have any checks? Oh yeah, I got a check. Do I have any captures? Yeah, I have a capture. Do I have any attacks? Well, if I'm not finished developing, I don't really want to look for attacks. How's that for a rule? Do I have any? Does my opponent have any threats, or do I have any threats that I can make? And you should be aware of threats because that flows back to free candy. And then the last one is, how did the situation change? But so that's free candy. I should take it by the consideration that free candy pretty much trumps everything because I can win the game with free candy. That all said, I'm showing you, yes, you can break the rule, right? Because if he does bad moves like this, I have this, remember, checks, captures, attacks. I have a chance to attack with check and forced moves. So those definitely will take priority. But the only reason I have this opportunity is because my opponent is not following the same set of guidelines as you have. Your opponent did not develop his pieces. Your opponent did not maintain king safety. And your opponent did not try to control the center. So if you think about it, if your rules are to, or your goals are to develop king safety and center control, this does none of those. It might try to do center control, but all you have to do is take it. And right now you can look at it and say, he hurt his king safety. There's no 3 unmoved pawns. He hurt his king safety. I can't even castle over here. He hurt his king safety. He did not develop any pieces. And now he's not controlling the center at all. So that's where we say, okay, but maybe he does this. Guess what? He didn't develop a piece yet, and he might never. People do this as beginners and don't fiend shadow the bishop. So he still hasn't developed any pieces. He hasn't thought about king safety, and he isn't controlling the center. And you have an attack, which you shouldn't have.
Wouldn't it be a better attack?
Nope. You're not going to find a better attack than this.
I was thinking about the one that threatens the rook, and then he would have to.
No.
Yeah, okay.
Because guess what? Forced answer. Now, he could do other things. He could push this pawn. He could bring out the knight. He could bring out the bishop. But he's hurting. And now, you could pick a different move. But then I get to take here with. He only has one legal move. He only has one legal move. So what could you do now? You could say check again. Wait, it keeps getting better. You could say check again. Not too shabby, right? Okay. So, yeah. So, yes, there is no, hey, you make these moves in this order every time and you will have a good game, safe, and you'll have a chance to win. It doesn't work that way. There are openings like the London system where it's pretty safe, right? So you could play the London system, which I don't mind, I kind of like. So let's say you play the London system and you say, hey, I know I'm going to push this pawn, I'm going to push this pawn, I'm going to bring my bishop out to here, I'm going to bring my knight out to here, I'm going to castle, and you really can't hurt me. I'm going to get all this done. But that's not true if you just blindly do that. Because now if you blindly do this, I just take your bishop, right? I wonder why that took so long. So I just take your bishop. So you can't blindly do it even in an opening like this opening that's supposed to be very simple and safe. You still have to pay attention to what your opponent does. You cannot play your moves ignoring your opponent. How's that? That's that to me would be one that we should put in here, right? You cannot
Yeah,
ignore your opponent.
That's a hard one. That's a hard one for beginners because you're so focused on what you're doing.
Well, you shouldn't be that focused on what you're doing, right? Because that's going to be bad form because you're going to get hurt if you're focusing that much on what you're doing and not on what your opponent is also doing. And even in the end games, we learned end games. But we learned end games. We know that you need to activate your king. We know that you want the rook behind the passed pawns. We know that what the opposition does for you. Right? We learned a whole lot of things when we did the first 9 lessons about how to win a king and a pawn endgame, a king and a queen, king and a rook, right? All of those, you had to pay attention to what your opponent did. Right? Otherwise, you might stalemate him if you had a king and a queen against a king. You have to pay attention to what your opponent does. It's no different in the opening. There was no, hey, I gave you the magic position in the end game, right? We said, and let's just put it over here. We had the magic position in the end game that if my king is here, my pawn is here, then it doesn't matter where your king is or whose move it is. We know this is a win for white. But we didn't tell you how to get there. And in fact, I like doing this problem with my students, white to move and win. And we talked about it. You know, you could go here, and your opponent can go here, and then you could start coming up on your opponent. And yeah, if you do everything right, you'll win, but you can make mistakes, right? So like right here, you could say like this, and now it's a draw. I have to pay attention to what my opponent does as well as what I'm supposed to do, but I have to pay attention to what my opponent does. He took the opposition, and I said, okay, you could keep it basically. Now you can stay in front of the pawn, and I lose. So you always have to pay attention, even when we're talking end games, in openings, you have to pay attention to what your opponent does. Yeah, I do have problems with dropping frames right now, guys. Yes. And I'm like, yeah, I got too many. I don't know if I have too many windows open. I'm going to close a whole bunch. We'll just close all those and see if that helps. But yeah, sometimes when I do Zoom and combining it with Twitch, sometimes we have problems. But I think it'll be better now. Okay, I'm all green right now. All right, so yes, back to the point. We develop, but we have to pay attention to what our opponent does. Free candy trumps in the sense that I got to make sure it's safe, but if somebody offers me free candy, I'm taking it. All right, Keith, let's play a game.
Yes, sir.
We've done it different ways. Today we're going to play a game. So I'm going to challenge Keith to a game, and it'll be casual because we don't want to hurt your rating.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I know you care. We're going to make it a 10-minute game, 10-0, and it's casual, and it will do random coloring. So go ahead and accept that when you get a chance. I think there should be a way for me to reset a board. There really should. All right. So I got white. All right, so I'm going to play a game with Keith, and what I want you guys to see, and what I'm going to talk you through, Keith, so, you'll it's not like I'm going to be trying to beat you. I'm going to be talking you through it with you. And let me make it so everybody can see the clocks. All right, so we're playing Keith. Keith is one of our students, and Keith doesn't play fast very well, so, we're not doing super fast either. But Keith, we're going to do what I talked about. I'm not even going to play the Vienna, and we've talked about the Vienna and different openings that I can do. I'm just going to play basic, develop as fast as I can. Don't hurt yourself, Chess Wizard. Okay, and we'll go for the Yoko Piano, the Italian game. Yoko Piano, I don't know all the names. All right, look at you. I'm going to keep developing, Keith.
So am I.
I like it when you develop, Keith. It's a good thing, right? That's what we want in life. We want to see you develop. I heard him. He said it doesn't matter.
That one doesn't matter to me.
Okay.
I think you missed your move.
Oh, look at that. Just attacking, attacking, attacking. So now I'm moving a non-center pawn. I did not develop a piece, but I'm putting the question to the bishop right away.
That was I was trying to get the queen cleared and go for the castle.
Yeah, no worries. Nothing wrong with that move. But I'm going to put a question to it right away. Oh, okay. Now I see that you're attacking my bishop. And if I take back, and this is, Murph, what we talked about, right? I could blindly keep developing. I could blindly just keep on developing, but I'm paying attention. My opponent made a move that attacks one of my pieces. I have to pay attention. He pinned my knight, and now he's attacking my bishop. So I have choices. I can back it up, so I could take back with one of these pawns, and I would never want to take away from the center. I shouldn't say never. Most times, 9 out of 10 times. Here's another general principle rule. When you take with a pawn a piece, you take towards the center. Okay, so I would go here. So I could say, well, I'll back up, and then I could take back if he takes. I could go here and transfer and create a pin here. Now, he could put a question to my bishop. My bishop could go here, he could chase me, and then I could still end up here. And all I got out of it was that his pawns are now rearranged. I don't know if that's for the better or the worse. But I can also take the bishop, because that's the other option. Whenever you're attacked, we didn't go over that, but whenever you're attacked, and this will be next week's probably, whenever you're attacked, you have up to 5 choices. I can put something in between. Nope, I don't have anything to put in between. I can take it. I can run away. That would be considered running away. This doesn't really run away because it's still going to be taken, but this could be running away, or it could be say, well, I'll protect it more, right? It's even more protected or better protected. So I have these choices. I can also attack something of greater or equal value. I could take this knight. If I take this knight, oh,
Good morning, we've talked the whole night through. Good morning to you. Good morning, good morning.
sorry, have to dance when I hear that song. Anyway, so I could take the knight, and by taking the knight, I attack the queen. That is something of equal or greater value. Keith cannot ignore that and just take my bishop. I mean, he could, but then I take his queen. So those would be the options. But I'm going to go ahead and take his bishop. And why? It doubles the pawns. But he will be taking towards the center, I assume. Now, he might take something of equal or greater value, like, say, check over here on f2, but that would be bad. Right? That would just be bad. He shouldn't do that. Yeah, King, we're playing a live game. And yes, I could have played knight to d2 and protect the bishop again. Yep. Hey, Sudakus. So I think we're not dropping frames anymore. That should be a good thing. All right, so Keith took. Sorry, I wasn't paying attention, Keith. I got to pay more attention. Got to catch up, my friend. All right, so now he's got this pawn cube. He hasn't castled yet. I'm feeling okay about my game. I'm feeling okay about everything, actually. And you know what? I think I will go for... I'm going to go for this move. I'm not going to tell him why. If I tell him everything I'm doing before I do it, then he doesn't have to actually play, and I can end up playing myself. But so far, Keith is doing great because he's developing his pieces. He only took back with the pawn because he had to. So he's doing great. And you notice he had to pick where to put the bishop. He chose here to pin. And then when I chased him, he had the same decision. He could have taken. He decided not to take. By the way, most times people take, queen takes back, knight comes here, attacking the queen, playing chase the queen runs away, because you also have to protect that square, and that's kind of how it ends up. All right, so now I have choices again. I can come back, and if Keith takes, I can take back with the queen. I don't have to take back with the pawn. I don't have to double my pawns. I can also go here, maintaining this beautiful pin, but my opponent can push a pawn, and we're going to do that for fun. See, now I'm going to try putting on some music. Maybe I can get away with playing music. Where's my music? Oh, you know what? Have it right there. All right. So his queen moves up, but if you notice, it doesn't break the pin. But I get the feeling he wants to castle this way. You know, I really get that feeling. He's going to, it looks like he wants, because look at this side, right? His pawn's already not unmoved. He's not going to have a comfortable time castling over there. So I think he wants to do things like this and then get the other rook over here. He's going to build an attack. Now, why do I say all that? To try to get him not to... No, the reason I say all that is because I should be guessing at what my opponent is doing. I should be trying to figure out why my opponent is doing the moves they're doing before they ever do them. That's just good chess, guys. We need to know, we need to have a good guess, because if I can guess what my opponent's doing before they do it, I can take advantage of things. All right, so center control, center attack. I see 1, 2, 3. I would have 1, 2, 3. So I'm pretty sure I could push. He takes, I take, he takes, I take, he takes, I take last. Oh, what happened to my music? There we go. And we're still green. All right, so the good news, Keith, is you are fully developed. I am not.
Yes, I am.
I still have a knight left to develop because I moved my queen into the only square that knight could go because I pushed this pawn. So I'm not as well developed as you are. I'm actually not as well developed as you are, so you should be winning this game. You just have to figure out how to do it. Because nothing's easy in this life, right? All right, so Keith is attacking my bishop. I can take, he could take, I could take back. I can sack the knight first. That's an option. I can take the bishop, he could take back, and he'd have a rook attacking me. And then my bishop would still be hanging. So I'm not so crazy about that either. But I did all this because I was looking at sacking stuff and having fun. So I'm going to continue to sack stuff and have fun. And now the knight actually protects the pawn, which is what I thought Keith should have done. I thought he should have just taken the pawn. That way he'd be attacking my queen and I would have to make decisions. Like, do I take his queen? Do I move my queen and attack his knight at the same time that my pawn is still attacking his bishop? Which is probably what I would have done, because that way I believe I would have won material. Yeah, I don't think it works either, Chess Wizard. I think queen to e2 would stop it. Oh, I did say you could protect it. I said you could back it up and protect it. I didn't show the knight move, though. And I said it already was protected. You're right, but that was another way to protect it. Yeah, I know, King. I haven't played. I don't play enough. I need to play some more games. I need to get back over 22. Thanks, King, for pointing that out. All right, so Keith doesn't take the free candy. Remember what I told you about free candy? Keith ignores the free candy, so I'm going to take his bishop because I like free candy. So this is what we were talking about, Murph. He did fine up to the point where he even attacked with the pawn. He's trying to win material. I took with the knight. He should have taken back either with the knight or he could have taken here with the pawn. But instead, he moved a rook. So he didn't deal with the bishop being under attack. And so now he gave me free candy. Now, he's threatening me, but nothing says I have to let him take anymore. Now I can move away. And so I'm pretty sure I'm just going to move away. Because I like keeping my free candy. So now I ended up with a free bishop. And a pawn. Because he gave me this pawn too. So this is why, but to be fair, he was out of the opening, and this is now middle game. And middle game will be coming after we finish teaching opening. So we will be teaching Murph about develop, and how to do it, and do it with these other things that we talked about. King safety, central control, but also watching out for free candy and paying attention to these other factors, right? We're going to cover all of them. We're not going to leave you guys hanging where all that it looks like we did was develop. We're going to make sure that you know how to do these other considerations. So we're going to do all of those before we ever talk about the middle game. And we'll talk about how you can learn different openings, what openings might be good or bad for you. We're going to talk about playing E4 versus D4 openings. So we will talk about openings, particular types or particular systems of openings, but mostly I wanted to talk about how do you do what you're supposed to do in the opening, which is those goals, right? Those goals are critical. But you brought up good points, like how do I deal with when there are like odd things going on? So, Murph, we are now up material, right? We're up a whole bishop. If I look, I have 3 minor pieces. I still haven't developed this knight. My rooks aren't talking. So I'm still behind in development, and that part bothers me. But right now, he's got 2 pieces. This one's still pinned. So if he moves the knight, I think I'm happy anyway because I still get to take his rook. And the queen is lining up, but I'm not actually scared of that at all at the moment. I might have to get scared about it soon, though. So I probably should really look hard and decide if I need to be scared about that. Because if I allow the rook to come first, he's threatening mate, and then I'd have to deal with it. And why give myself that timing? So I'm just going to take the knight. And after he takes the knight, I already know what I'm going to do. I'm assuming he's going to take back and not give me free candy. So I'm not going to pre-move something like you can in this world of chess. You can pre-move, but I don't want to pre-move because he might blunder and let me take his queen, or he might move his queen away and I could take the rook. So again, I always have to wait and pay attention to what my opponent does. Yeah, slide chess. I would love that. Why not? I enjoyed the master class we did on the Vienna Gambit. I'd say yes. Let's do a defense. I will have to line up some streamers to help me out, but I'd say yes. I'd say yes. Verily. Let's make it happen, my friend. Let's make it happen. All right. There is no real threat at this exact moment, but I'm just going to move out of the way because I don't like alignment. We've talked a little bit about alignment in endgames. We're going to definitely cover alignment, tactics, and there's tons of tactics. Pins, skewers, double attacks. We're going to cover all of those at a later time, guys. We're going to cover all of those, trust me. We're going to cover all of those as part of your your education. It will be part of this master, or not master series, but part of this series. We will be covering basic tactics. So we will be covering those, just so you know. All right, so Keith is also going to be low on time. We told you he doesn't do great on time. Oh, look at Keith being aggressive. We got to like aggressive, Keith. Don't know that works for you, but I like the aggressiveness. All right, I'm going to take back with the knight. My knight really wasn't doing anything here too much. And my queen, I didn't want to put my, don't ask me why. I'm just going to take with the knight. So my second opening against that, actually I've been playing with the perk. Been playing with the Perk defense right now. But it's always been the French. I've played the French since I was 8 years old. But yeah, I might very well. I've been playing around with the Perk. I've also just played E5 back. I've played the Vienna. I've played the Stafford Gambit. I've played the Latvian counter gambit. I've played just E5 back. In fact, I have my students always play. Oh, he moved. Sorry. I have my students always play E5. So I actually try to get. Oh, what are you doing pre-moving? So
that was an accident.
oh, okay. Fair enough.
Well, I quit twice on that puppy.
So, but it worked out for you. At least you didn't lose anything. Right? You
Yeah.
didn't lose any material that way. So, guys, more free candy.
Yeah, that was a misclick.
We like free candy. I'm just curious where you're going to go, so I'm going to go here. Oh, okay. Yeah, I like the perk so far. I've been reading about it, been watching some videos, and I had looked at it a long time ago because you could actually play the perk setup against E4 or D4. So I'm always looking for less study time in my opening choices. Oh, free candy. And now that's normal, Keith, because you're running out of time. So whenever you're low on time, we expect you to give away more free candy. That's just expected, right?
Yeah, there it is again.
Yeah. And I shouldn't have done that. I should have done this and said checkmate. So I had checkmate, but you're under the problem of, you're running out of time, so. All right.
There we go.
And it doesn't matter, right? But the point is, what I want to show you guys, which Keith did a great job of, is he developed his pieces, guys. Look at all this. Beautiful. Did a great job. Even back to here is no problem because, again, you took back towards the center. That was fine. Now, this move weakened your king side and declared that you were going to castle queen side. So if you just hadn't done that and still planned to castle queen side, like say move your queen here, then if I take and double up your pawns, you don't care. Castle queen side. Now you have an open file at my king. But that's advanced. That's advanced stuff we're not worried about right now. So the good news is you castled. You are winning the development race. I have one piece still not developed. So what your job is to try to find an attack now. So I would have went with this one right away. I don't remember if that's what you did. Nope. It was my move. Okay. So I moved here. So now you can get rid of your doubled pawns.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So you should have just taken. Yeah, I get to take back, but then you just move your bishop.
Yeah, that would have been it.
Yeah, you're fine. But you kind of panicked. Not really.
Yes,
Not really. But remember, if you're under attack, you're choosing to attack something of equal or greater value. Now, I didn't tell you guys this, but it's my last thing I'll tell you because it's at 9:30, perfect timing. When we talk about the things you could do when you're attacked, we're going to go over it next week for sure. I gave you 5 things. The best thing most of the time, again, Murph, it's not a rule. It's a percentage. The highest percentage of time, the correct answer is take the piece that's attacking you. So even in this case, I'm attacking. The best move for Keith is probably to take it because it fixes his double pawns. There's always something good. So you take, I take back, the bishop moves away, or even comes here and attacks the queen, play chase the queen a little bit. You're fine, right? You're fine. So you could come here or here, and you're fine. But you take first. So even here, the best choice is taking the piece. The one that is right the least amount of time is attacking something of equal or greater value. least amount of time it's the right move is to attack something of equal or greater value. So the most of the time the correct answer is take it if you can. Then we have things like run away, put something in between, defend the piece, right? And then we have the one that's the least right most of the time is going to be to attack something of equal or greater value. But I will tell you, Keith, I will tell you all, when it is right, it's awesome. When you find out that the right move is to attack something of equal or greater value, it's a killer move. Okay, it just wins, right? It can win outright. So now we look and we say we still have a piece attacked. We're attacking a piece, but we don't take the piece that's attacking. By the way, we just removed one of the defenders. So now we could take, and if we take back, you could just take it. You just win it. So again, taking is the right answer. You got my knight, which was one of my defenders, to leave. You could just take it. It was yours to take. So you should have won this game. But we moved our rook over instead, which doesn't deal with this at all. And you're not even attacking something of equal or greater value. It's actually not doing anything. It's not attacking. It's not interposing. It's totally, there might be a sixth choice, and that would be ignore the attack. Which we don't use, right? That's not a good choice. So you should never.
That's a choice, but not the one you ever take.
Yes, we don't want that. All right. So anyway, but good job, Keith. Overall, good job. You developed your pieces. Where did you fall apart? Was when I did not develop my pieces. I attacked, and so this is next week's lesson. What do you do when you're under attack? Because you did everything you were supposed to up to this point. I think you're winning. Right? You're at least winning the development race because I have a piece that's not developed. I have a queen that is protected twice, but it's in alignment with a rook. So I like your side. I would play black. You got a lot of options here if you're black. Okay? So it's just, then we didn't talk about it today, but we will next week, is what do you do when you're under attack? But first thing we're going to have to finish up is still going over the goals for the opening. But none of it matters. The end game doesn't matter. The opening doesn't matter. The middle game doesn't matter if you're giving away free candy. Gotta stop giving away free candy. All right. Any questions?
No, good class.
I'm glad you liked it. All right, it's just a start. It's our start to the openings, and we will be continuing on. But thank you very much, guys. I'm going to leave the Zoom and let you guys, because last time you guys started to chat, and I bounced you out, and I didn't mean to. So I'm going to leave the meeting, and you guys can still converse, but I'm going to save bandwidth, and I'm going to spend a half an hour talking to the chat. See you guys later.
Thanks, bro.
Hey, Irv.
All right, guys, so they're now off, which should keep me in the green, although I was in the green a lot in that ending. All righty, I'm going to actually leave